Ron
went to the
Howard
wrap
became
party.
famous as the redheaded boy from The Andy Griffith Show, but the real story behind the cameras was far different from what viewers saw on television. While millions of Americans watched A Perfect Small Town Family every week, the actors were dealing with serious conflicts that would last for decades. The Andy Griffith Show ran on CBS from 1960 to 1968, giving audiences 249 episodes over 8 seasons. The show portrayed a simpler time in the fictional town of Mayberry, North Carolina, where Sheriff Andy Taylor raised his son Opie with help from his Aunt Bee. Andy Griffith described the show as feeling like the 1930 rather than the 1960 when it was filmed. The series was incredibly popular, never ranking lower than 7th in the ratings, and ending its final season at number 1. Behind the wholesome image, however, tensions were building between cast members. Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, developed a feud that would simmer for years. Their conflict wasn't just a simple disagreement, but a deep personality clash that affected everyone on set. Even young Ron Howard, who played Opie, noticed the problems between his television father and aunt. Ron Howard came from a show business family. Born in Oklahoma in 1954, his father Rance was an actor and director, while his mother Jean was also an actress. By age 5, Ron was already working in television and movies, appearing in shows like The Twilight Zone and Dennis the Menace, before landing his breakthrough role on The Andy Griffith Show. He was credited as Ronnie Howard during those early years. The show made Ron famous across America, but it also taught him difficult lessons about working with people who didn't get along. While Andy Griffith was warm and friendly with the cast, Frances Bavier kept her distance. She was known for being extremely private and professional, but this came across as cold to her fellow actors. Ron Howard would later remember how uncomfortable it was to work with Bavier, especially during scenes where they had to appear close as family members. The tension between Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier stemmed from their completely different approaches to acting and life. Griffith was social and liked to joke around with the cast between takes. Bavier preferred to stay by herself and took her role very seriously. She had high standards and expected everyone else to match them. Directors found her difficult to work with because she would resist even small changes, like moving a few steps for better camera angles. One particularly memorable incident involved a scene where Ron Howard's character had to eat Aunt Bee's homemade pickles. The problem was that Ron actually hated pickles in real life, and he had to eat them over and over again for multiple takes. Making matters worse, he had to act like he enjoyed them while working opposite Bavier, who remained distant and professional throughout the uncomfortable experience. The conflict between Griffith and Bavier became so serious that Griffith once tried to visit her at home to make peace. This gesture completely backfired. Bavier was upset that he had shown up without being invited, and the visit only made their relationship worse. The wall between them grew even higher after that failed attempt at reconciliation. For years, the two stars maintained a professional working relationship on screen while barely speaking off camera. This tension was kept secret from the public, but it affected the entire cast and crew. Other actors had to navigate carefully around the feud, never knowing when something might set off another conflict. The situation finally changed near the end of Frances Bavier's life. She was battling cancer and facing her own mortality when she decided to reach out to Andy Griffith. After years of silence and resentment, she called him on the phone. During that conversation, she apologized for her behavior and admitted that she had been difficult to work with. She acknowledged that Griffith had been a good leader on the show and credited him with much of its success. This final conversation meant a lot to both actors. Griffith later said that Bavier's apology was sincere and that it helped heal old wounds. It was a powerful moment that showed how people can change and find forgiveness even after years of conflict. Frances Bavier died in 1989 at age 86. Ironically, she spent her final years living in North Carolina, the same state where her fictional character Aunt Bee had lived. She retired from acting in 1972 and moved to the small town of Siler City, where locals remembered her as private but kind. Her health declined in her later years, particularly due to heart problems, and she died at a local hospital. Andy Griffith also lived to age 86, passing away in 2012 at his home on Roanoke Island in North Carolina. His death marked the end of an era for television fans who had grown up watching The Andy Griffith Show. Both actors had found peace in North Carolina, the state that had served as the inspiration for their fictional Mayberry. For Ron Howard, the experience of watching this adult conflict unfold was educational in ways he probably didn't expect as a child actor. He learned that even in the entertainment business, personal relationships matter enormously. The tension between his television father and aunt showed him how personality differences can create lasting problems, even when people are trying to do good work together. After the Andy Griffith Show ended, Ron Howard continued acting in Happy Days, where he played Richie Cunningham, but he had bigger ambitions than just acting. Even while working on Happy Days, he was learning about directing and preparing for a career behind the camera. His first directing job came in 1977 with a low-budget film called Grand Theft Auto, which he made as part of a deal with producer Roger Corman. From there, Ron Howard's directing career took off. He made successful films like Splash in 1984, which starred Tom Hanks, and eventually won Academy Awards for directing A Beautiful Mind in 2001. His transition from child actor to respected director was remarkable, but it wasn't without challenges. One of those challenges came later in his career when he decided to adapt J.D. Vance's memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, into a Netflix film. At the time, Vance wasn't involved in politics, and Howard was interested in telling a story about resilience and family struggles in Appalachia. However, after Vance became a politician and eventually a candidate for vice president, Howard found himself disappointed by the political positions Vance took. This situation reminded Howard of his early experiences with Frances Bavier. Just as he had learned that Aunt Bee's on-screen warmth didn't match her off-camera personality, he discovered that the person he thought he understood through Hillbilly Elegy had become someone quite different in the political arena. It was another lesson about how people can surprise you, sometimes in disappointing ways. Throughout all of these experiences, Ron Howard has maintained his reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable and steady directors. He's known for avoiding drama and controversy, preferring to focus on making good films rather than getting involved in public disputes. However, the early lessons he learned on The Andy Griffith Show about personality conflicts and professional relationships have clearly stayed with him throughout his career. The story of The Andy Griffith Show reminds us that even the most wholesome entertainment can hide complex human relationships. The show continues to be beloved by fans who remember it as representing a simpler, more innocent time in American life. Annual festivals in North Carolina celebrate the fictional town of Mayberry, and reruns still air regularly on television. But the real story behind the show is more complicated, and perhaps more interesting than the simple tales it told on screen. The conflict between Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier, witnessed by a young Ron Howard, shows how difficult it can be for people with different personalities to work together, even when they're creating something that brings joy to millions of viewers. In the end, both Griffith and Bavier found a way to make peace with each other, and Ron Howard used the lessons he learned from watching their conflict to build his own successful career. The Andy Griffith Show may have been about a perfect small town, but the real people who made it were beautifully, complicatedly human.